Can we produce enough food to feed everyone on the planet? With climate change and growing populations, it's one of the most urgent questions of our time. The pressure on our food systems is mounting. Across the globe, well-meaning policies to ensure sustainable food security require reshaping farming practices and are often faced with a lot of resistance from farmers.
I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. They can piss off. Oh, I hate the government so much.
If you've watched Clarkson's farm, you've seen Jeremy Clarkson, a total farming beginner, take on the world of agriculture. Clarkson's frustrations echo a common sentiment among real-life farmers who argue that the red tape of government regulations feels endless. The show has become famous for highlighting several key issues within agricultural policy. But why do significant policy changes not happen? Aleid Teeuwen, a plant scientist by training, now devotes her research to assessing governance measures aimed at improving food security.
I think that's what often goes wrong when we implement policies, is that we don't really consider what farmers aspire to achieve.
If policies fail to align with farmers' aspirations, what are we overlooking?
The core of my belief is that people do what makes sense for them to do. Once we kind of map that, I think we'll find sensible explanations for why farmers aren't doing what we might want them to do, and then explore alternatives, ways in which they might actually do what we want them to do, because they will benefit from that along their kind of own measurements of success.
So you make the call, but this is your decision now. Call it, go on.
But if farm management decisions are based on what makes sense for them to do, how does that work?
Oh, can you please just make the decision?
I can't make a decision.
I'll do it for you, then we're going.
Aleid simulates these choices in an agent-based model, computer simulations that show how individuals interact with each other and their environment, revealing how their choices and behaviours shape larger outcomes over time. She uses Aspiration Adaptation Theory, a theory that suggests that decision-making is based on a combination of factors: past experiences,
My friend lost 40 hives last year.
present opportunities, and external pressures like climate and market dynamics.
So we should be milking 120 and we're milking 60. So not currently viable.
But what exactly does this theory encompass?
Aspirations are the goals that we aspire to achieve in order to have a good life. And then we implicitly or explicitly have certain thresholds for different aspirational dimensions. And whenever we perform above those thresholds or at those thresholds, it's good enough. So we will continue with whatever we were doing until our aspirations change.
Cows.
Cows.
I know the sheep were a disaster.
And then we will look for ways to improve along the aspirational dimensions that weren't met.
So how does this theory translate to computer simulations?
The majority of the models, they assume just one aspirational dimension. So farmers would be, for example, purely motivated by income.
That is an awful lot of work for not quite enough money.
Or by food production, or some agronomic thing like herd size.
How many cows was that?
That was from 5.
Some studies, they assume that kind of the thresholds we set for our aspirations, that they are static. Others assume they change over time, and if they assume they will change over time,
we can't keep doing that.
Then different studies have different theories about what influences thresholds. Some studies will assume that it's only the past experiences that influence how the thresholds change over time.
We've lost 80% of our insects.
While others think that the agents have some expectation towards the future that will influence also the aspirations. And there is some research that suggests that humans kind of by nature are chronically optimistic.
I like to think the future of farming is bright and light and...
How?
But I want to say positive because I love what I do.
So we will, over time, always think we can do slightly better than we did in the past. So the theory says that whenever the aspirations we have are not met by our current circumstances, we will look for alternatives.
And this, too, according to the theory, could be done in many different ways. You could just randomly try something new.
Yes! Who knew? I've done a thing that works! don't know what sort of vacuum cleaner this is, I'm not an expert, but they're marketing it all wrong. Look at that.
You could consider all the different options and then choose the very best one. Or you could consider a certain number of alternatives and settle for the first satisfiable option.
I'll do.
But then if you do that, okay, which order would you consider these different options? That matters because you're not choosing the best one, you're choosing the first one you think is good enough.
In her model, Aleid managed to combine all these theoretical assumptions, almost like a factorial design. This allowed her to run simulations and see how each approach influences the model's outcomes. But what does this look like in practice?
The 3 aspirational dimensions I included in the model are income, food self-sufficiency, and leisure.
In the model, income implies a farmer is mostly motivated by sales. Food sufficiency implies a farmer does what he does mainly for feeding his own family. And leisure implies that a farmer considers it a non-obligatory personal activity.
All those adventures I've had in my life, and yet I've ended up doing this. And I love it. I just love it.
You can assume static threshold or dynamic thresholds. And then the 3 ways in which farmers can consider these are through random draws, selection in a sequential loop, and then the first one is chosen, and then optimized selection, so everything is considered and then the best one is chosen. It's of course slightly simplified and stylized, but I try to make it as explicit as possible, so yeah, like being transparent about the assumptions that I do make. And then whenever you're not certain, you should make sure that whatever advice you give remains valid given the uncertainty that is still there. For example, if I'm not fully certain that leisure plays an important role, I can run the simulation with leisure as an aspirational dimension, without leisure as an aspirational dimension. And then, yeah, whatever advice I would want to give should be effective in both of those simulations. I often see it as kind of on and off switches, and you combine different on and off switches and yeah, see how the results change based on which switches are on and which switches are off.
Aleid designed this model for the Ethiopian context. But could we create a similar model for other contexts? What would it take, for example, to simulate decision-making on Clarkson's farm?
It would require firstly, field work. I would need the aspirational thresholds.
So we want 12 cows.
12 cows.
And the relevant aspirations for that context.
Who needs supermarkets? We've got 7 left.
Good.
That's all we've got.
We would also need to know what the people consider alternatives to their current management.
Here's my next plan. Turn the lambing barn, which we don't need anymore, into a restaurant.
Yeah, and based on that, it could be translated, yeah.
While Clarkson's farm has sparked significant public debate and raised awareness about farming challenges, it hasn't led to major policy changes yet, and Aleid hopes her model can make just that difference.
I really hope that it can inspire people to kind of look at farmers and maybe more widely the kind of individuals that we sometimes kind of from an up-down perspective want to change. Try to see, okay, what do they aspire to achieve, and does what they are doing make sense from that perspective? And if we want them to change, look at how we can make change happen from that perspective, and also that change should then be in the benefit of whoever he wants to change, yeah.